Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
We're so pleased to bring you the fourth week in our special series titled Celebrating Canadian-American Friendship. If you haven't been to certain parts of Canada, particularly British Columbia, and about what our program is about today, I really urge you to go to Fort Steele Heritage Town, which is a restored pioneer hometown, a boomtown located near Cranbrook, British Columbia. The origin of Fort Steele can be traced to the small settlement of Calbrus Ferry, which was born during the 1864 Kootenai Gold Rush. Our four guests on the program today have been with us at North Idaho College to perform a wonderful play about the Fort Steele Heritage Town. So welcome to the program. First of all is Mr. Frank Hackett. Frank, welcome to the program. We're so pleased to have you here.
So glad to be here.
And next to him is Lori Reed, and Lori, equally so pleased to have you here.
Thank you, Tony.
And thank you for helping coordinate this whole process with us. You've been so cooperative.
It's been lots of fun.
And then Alexander Gilmore, welcome.
Thank you.
Pleased to have you here. And Wynn Royer, please, welcome. And all four of you are so good to be with us. Lori, I'll start out with you.
Absolutely.
And tell us a little more about why Fort Steele Heritage Town came about. I've been there. I've visited. And it's like going back in time. And when I was there, everything was set up, and the hotel and the dining room and the dentist's office and all. And it looked like everybody had just walked away, and I had walked back into the 1800s and was seeing what they had done.
Exactly. It's kind of like eavesdropping on the turn of the century,
Yes.
really, in some ways, isn't it? It is an actual town. The fun thing about Fort Steele is really that when you're walking down the streets of the town, you're walking down streets that people were walking down more than 100 years ago. And it kind of was just sort of left. It went through a whole economic boom, which we may talk about a little bit later, and then it went through a bit of a decline, ghost towny kind of situation, and the provincial government actually stepped in at the town folks' request and made a preservation type project out of it and turned it into a heritage property.
How long has it been restored so that people to come visit?
1961 is when the province actually acquired the property and carried on with it. Renovations and a few moving of buildings and what have you onto the town site started in around the 70s, late 60s and early 70s.
And so what's the season when you're open?
Oh gosh, we're actually open year-round. We're closed on Christmas Day, but varying levels of programming throughout the season. Our main season is from May until Canadian Thanksgiving in October, and then we have more programming in the peak of the summer periods in July and August.
And Frank, will come to you and talk a little bit about what's your role. I know that when I was there, it was, I'm not sure when it was, but it was all season, I guess, because the play was not going on. And so, Frank, tell us a little bit about the play and the performances that you do when people are visiting you, and what is the message?
Well, we have quite a few different messages we like to share with people. We have a bit of a living history program at Fort Steele, and what that is basically you'll be brought back to the 1890s and see some of the more colorful characters of Fort Steele's past. Learn a little bit about the history of Fort Steele through their eyes. So we have the living history program. We also have the Wild Horse Show, which is a bit of a musical type, fun, laughter kind of show where a group of actors go through a live kind of musical review, so to speak. This year's theme is a Wild West kind of shoot 'em up kind of theme, and you get to see a little more of a fictional take on the theater in the past, whereas in living history you'll see a more historically accurate.
I just have to say that it's part of that wonderful Canadian humor, I hope, that comes out in that. You have great
Absolutely.
sense of humor.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a guest here a couple of weeks ago from Canada who said we're very much known for our love for hockey and for beer, and please don't make us choose between them, which is a great example of that sense of humor.
Civil War #2.
You're all delightful. When would you also share with us some of your knowledge about and your role and what you've learned about not only Fort Steele but that time period and the role that you play?
Well, I've been fortunate to be at Fort Steele for over 20 years. And
The veteran of the group.
Yeah, in many ways. And I portray two fascinating women. One is school teacher, cut from the cloth of her mother was Tasmanian, her father was Irish, and she's very much as Victorian ladies would be. And my other character is a Métis mule packer. So I get to sort of experience both extremes and how women, especially of the time, I suspect this is true of men too, but women really had to be gutsy, and they had to. The Victorian time was a time when ladies were supposed to be sitting around doing needlework and making inane conversation and not doing too much with their lives. And I think the women who came out to places like Fort Steele were ready to live life to its fullest and to have adventure and to make their mark on the world. And they certainly did. And that's sort of, that's part of what we portray out there, the kind of impact women like that had on other people.
One thing I do in conducting this program is that you make comments that just really generate another question, which is always a compliment to you, particularly as you speak of the women, but also the men of the time. Does it take a certain type of pioneer, I guess a hardy person, to have gone west at those times? There are some people that would have never survived in those times in the more like the wilderness area, would they?
Definitely. Definitely. I think the ladies who didn't want to have adventure stayed at home. They stayed at home in England and kept within their roles. And the women who did venture forth into who knows what, really, a lot of the time they didn't know what kind of life was going to meet them, had to be very adventurous.
And tough.
And tough.
Survivors.
Yeah.
Right.
But adaptable, too, I think,
Okay.
in many ways, you know.
Alexandra, would you tell us something about your role and the message that comes from your character or characters?
My privilege to play Robert Leslie Thomas Galbraith, who was pretty much the founder of the town. His brother John Galbraith started the ferry, which allowed the miners to go over to their mining claims. Now John Galbraith didn't have any mining claims, but he was charging each man $5 to cross the river, and considering he had up to 200 men crossing every day, he didn't really need a gold mine. He sold his business interests to Robert Galbraith. That's the character I play. Now, Robert was a packer who evolved into the town businessman, probably the wealthiest man in the Kootenays at the time. He's Irish. He has his hand in many things. He was a lay preacher for the Anglican Church. He was on the Board of School Trustees. He got the school started in Fort Steele. He was the one that met Superintendent Fort Steele and his Northwest Mounted Police when there was a threat of an uprising in the area. He was the one that met them and brought as many of them as he could safely into the area. A really colorful character, but also a very prim, proper man who, wasn't afraid to get dirty but ended up in a business suit kind of character. That's
brought
me.
his class with him to the west.
Yes, yes.
Laurie, when we say Fort Steele, that was a British fort, is that correct?
It actually never was a fort in the
Really?
typical version or definition of the word. As Alexander mentioned, Sam Steele came out with his 75 men of the Kootenay D Division, and they established the Kootenay Post.
But were they British military people?
They were actually Canadian farmers, and actually Sam Steele went around Canada and picked up farmers and cowboys and teamsters and just sort of whoever he could find, I think, really, and made this.
Created the Northwest Mounted Police.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting because I've been under the wrong impression all that time. So, but these were people that were, like in our case in the United States, going west and pioneering, but they were not representing the British government.
Don't believe so.
No, I think not. I read once where Sam Steele said the best Mounties, Northwest Mounted Police they were called then, were farmers because they knew how to work hard, they knew how to deal with the weather, and it was a tough life being a mounted policeman. The weather, and it was hard to get out of the Mounties again if you found you didn't like it. So they were an interesting breed.
Frank, I'm trying to get all this together, and it's so exciting to me, the history of it all. Frank, tell us about your character.
I'm playing a few characters. One is Constable Barnes, who, when the Mounties pulled out, was part of the BC Provincial Police Service and was one of the lone policemen in Fort Steele. The other is a bit of a fun role because he's sort of the villain in the whole side of things. Some will say not, but I play Colonel Baker, who was the representative for the region and had a bit of a hand in making Fort Steele disappear, and so to speak. As you mentioned at the very start, you said near Cranbrook, BC. Cranbrook didn't exist until Colonel Baker bought some land and decided that the railway should come through there instead of Fort Steele.
So Fort Steele is older than Cranbrook.
Absolutely.
Your wonderful people from Cranbrook, your mayor and the city council will be here on Friday, and I will have to share with them that the people that were in the area before them that's already been here this week. So, Lori, tell us.
As history dictates.
As history dictates. We're trying to be accurate. I'm sure they'll take it well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Lori, tell us more about your role in all of this process. And
My role is not dramatic at all. My role is actually on the administration side. I work in the office for the Friends of Fort Steele Society, and I look after marketing, visitor programs, coordinate special events, volunteer programs, some costuming, and all marketing and advertising.
So you're real modern. You're not part of the
I'm really
characters.
modern. I have a costume and I wander around and I do. We have two different kinds of interpretation at Fort Steele. Third person, which is just Lori dressed in a costume, being Miss Reed walking down the street, talking to visitors in this era. And then, of course, the first person interpretation, which is what these fine folks are doing, where they're actually assuming one of the historical characters. So I'm a modern girl.
You're also enjoyable. It makes me think of something I hadn't thought of in a long, long time. I was about 9 years old, and I was in a play, and I memorized my part just so easily. And when the curtains opened that evening, and I saw the crowd, I went blank. I didn't know anything. They had to repeat every word for me. I've never been in a play since, so maybe I could do that, where we'd be in a costume, and I don't say anything. I could just walk. It was the most frightening moment of my life. It's called stage fright.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we have funny moments, like when I'm wandering around, especially in the middle of a special event, we might have 3,000 or 4,000 people kicking around the site. It's a large site. And I've got my walkie-talkie and my cell phone tucked into my string bag, and if something rings, I'm in trouble. It's sort of, oops, my bag is ringing, excuse me.
That's like seeing a Western, and there's a horse going down the road in the 1800s, and you see a telephone pole, and they didn't edit that out, you know. Well, a couple more things about the settlement itself, and I just really didn't understand what Fort Steele meant until now. It's here where we're located at North Idaho College is Fort Sherman, and we are going to be doing a program in the afternoon after you've done your morning program. But it was a federal fort with federal military fort, and there's some things that happened that, of course, were unpleasant in our forts in the West, and what happened to Native Americans and all. But this is not a fort in that sense, isn't correct? It wasn't. No. Share this a little bit more. May I go back to Alexander, because of the character you mentioned, or a couple of them. So it was more like a settlement when you had people doing a lot of different kinds of jobs. It was turned into what we'd call a town.
Well, yeah, the gold rush actually finished in 1865.
And that's what brought them in, was the gold.
But the gold rush originally brought them in. After 1865, though, a lot of people decided to stay and farm the land or ranch. A lot of logging, there was lots of trees, and other minerals were being discovered at that time. The Sullivan mine outside of Kimberley just recently quit in the last 4 years.
After all of those years?
After, over a century of mining lead and zinc, which was transported to Trail. And
so some of the people who had gone there for gold purposes went over into this other mining?
Into other mining, yes, and other businesses. And so as more people came in, they settled into the area. It was called Galbraith's Ferry until Superintendent Sam Steele came in. As I say, there was a friction between the native people, the Tanaha people, and the white settlers. Superintendent Sam Steele came in. He stayed for a year. He managed to get everybody in agreement without firing a single shot.
So kind of an arbitrator and negotiator for peaceful settlement.
Yeah, he was a brilliant negotiator, knew how to work with people, When he left, the townspeople were polled, and they decided they'd rather be Fort Steele rather than Galbraith's Ferry.
In honor of him.
In honor of Sam Binfield Steele, yes.
And tell us more about the, once the gold rush was over and all, and of course you've already talked about your characters, but so people became farmers, and what other things did they do other than farming? It became a permanent settlement. Did they have, some of them when they were in logging, or was it all farming, or what all did they do?
I think the biggest universal commitment was to the mining. Like even hotel owners and businessmen and almost everyone had their fingers in the mining. And that's why Fort Steele wanted to be the center, the metropolis of the Kootenays. They wanted to draw more and more people. They wanted the railway. They felt that they were booming, and not just a boom and bust kind of town, but a real center for agriculture, for everything. But the mining was doing it because they had mines all around the area, and it was the kind of mining that would sustain them for a length of time.
So with the mining, which is the biggest industry, and you had the farmers, and then you have businesses in there to support all that, and you mentioned hotels and all. So it would be, to some extent, would it not be like today, where in a community you have you may have a major economy, but you have support systems for that?
Yeah, very much so.
Lori, can you tell us a little more about when you say that, we're in Kootenai County, Idaho, and we spell it a little bit different than that. Tell us a little about the geographical area of the Kootenays. When you said Fort Steele, as Alexander was talking about, was going to be the center, but geographically, what we're speaking about, or what are the other communities as it's developed in the Kootenai area too?
Oh goodness, we've got Fort Steele, and it's if you can envision the province of British Columbia, on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little section that's almost like the toe of a boot that sticks out into Alberta, really, and that whole slice off, really, that whole part of the region is the Kootenai region, east and west. We start to the north with the towns of Golden and Revelstoke, way up in the mountains there, just below Banff, BC, or Banff, Alberta, I'm sorry. Other communities in the area include Radium and Invermere, Fairmont Hot Springs. We come down through Fort Steele, out to the east, Fernie, Sparwood, those sorts of areas, and then you carry on through to Lethbridge. To the west, we head towards areas like Caslow, New Denver, Silverton, which are also wonderful old historical towns, if you will, Creston, and Castlegar Trail, all those sorts of areas to the west. And then pretty much to the south is the United States of America. There's not actually much between Fort Steele, Cranbrook area and the U.S., just a few hours drive.
At the risk of being controversial, I would say that today, as you live there, and it is such a beautiful country, but Fort Steele's not the largest population anymore.
Oh no!
Cranbrook has far exceeded. I got to get something in for Cranbrook too, because we had this other fun about.
And we love Cranbrook.
Of course. Most of you live in Cranbrook,
Absolutely.
which is only 7 or 8 miles from Fort Steele.
Right.
It's 16 kilometers actually.
Oh,
which
here
is
we
a
go.
whole another issue.
Confuse you, Tony.
Just to confuse us, we were asked by our Congress, and I think it was the 1970s, that we go to the metric system in 10 years, and we said, "You say what?" And we've never gone to the system, and so we're so much alike in so many ways, but we're different in other ways. Frank, why don't you talk to us a little bit more about life there today, and because this rich history you have has to continue to have influence. So could you share with us how life today is still, as Wynn was talking about, the hardy people were there at the beginning, how is it still impacting you people today?
Well, I think it's sort of shifted from the fact that you used to have to be hardy. It's sort of become a lifestyle choice. It's a gorgeous area to live, and there are so many. What used to be a hardship is now what people seek. They want to get out into the woods for a hike. They want to go hop in a canoe and do some fishing. What used to be just, I have to go and hike up the mountain to head up to my spot is now, boy, I can't wait to get to the top of the mountain and see what's up there. It's just a gorgeous place to live. And I think that's one of the main draws to the area. Ultimately, Cranbrook is now the center of the East Kootenays for sure. It's the main service. Service is probably the main industry in Cranbrook now. What used to be mining and railway is now and timber is now it's become this service industry in itself.
Lori, and it's what Frank's talking about, you have a lot of tourists now.
Oh, we'd like a few more. Absolutely. So
Well,
part of the
let's
reason
just use
we're
it.
here.
Let's use this
But
program
yes.
to promote that. You know.
Please
I've
come
already
on in.
indicated what a great
Yeah.
place. So if tourists come and
Yeah.
visit Fort Steele, and they can do other things, they can hike and they can fish and do all kind of things. Do most all of them stay in Cranbrook? Or how about the facilities? I assume you have a great deal of places for tourists to stay over for several days.
There's a wonderful range of facilities, actually, Tony. Everything from mountain cabins up in the mountains of Kimberley, if you want to go skiing or hiking or mountain biking or what have you. Plenty of full service and really wonderful hotels right in the town of Cranbrook, where there are the theaters and the shopping and historical tours of houses around the town and what have you. And then all the way up to accommodations and what have you up around Fairmont and Radium, which have the natural hot springs, and all within sort of an hour's drive or so.
Oh,
So there's a huge range. We've
those
got
hot
two.
springs are just heaven.
I know. We've got campsites, absolutely extraordinary.
I guess you could just hire me as a Chamber of Commerce promoter for what you're doing. Wynn, why don't you and Alexander also add to this process? And what else would you say that would be so wonderful for people to visit and see, other than what Frank and Lori have already talked about?
Well, I think I have to go back to Fort Steele.
Okay.
Because it is a unique place. And I think what I've heard from the visitors over the years is that the wonderful thing about visiting Fort Steele is that you're sucked right in, you're pulled right in. Tony, you come to see us, you will be a potential citizen of Fort Steele as soon as you walk in our gate.
Well, I've already been there and hooked
Yeah,
on it. Yeah.
and it
It's just a
happens,
fascinating
right?
place, yeah.
And we pull people in, and they have an experience that's unique, and so that's very special. I think the other thing that comes to mind is driving today. Lori's slowing down for deer, looking at deer, and I'm thinking yesterday I was shooing them out of my yard. So the wildlife is incredible. Both Alexander and I've had bears in our yard. I've had a moose up my back alley. It's pretty.
We had a moose
pretty
in the middle of
exceptional.
the field at Fort Steele just last week, actually.
Now, I
I went
understand.
running out to see him graze.
Moose are not quite as friendly as deer, are they?
No.
They're forces to be reckoned with.
Alexander, what would you add?
A couple of things. The most impressive thing, you will see this from Cranbrook, the steeple range and Mount Fisher Peak of the Rockies. But when you get to Fort Steele, it's right up against you. When you get out of your car in the parking lot and walk through the gates into Fort Steele, you have virtually left behind modern day.
You have.
You, the people are clothed 1898 fashion. Anything that was created after 1898 will not be on the site, which leads to some really interesting things. Electricity was around in those days, so you do see the electric poles. A lot of things that people think didn't happen until after the Second World War actually happened before the turn of the century. So there's that on-site education right now. Noise is at a minimum. The aura of peace that descends
noticed that
over the
when I was
place
there.
because it is very slowed down and laid back. When the actors are performing, they have pretty much the full attention of the passers-by, because there's not that many distractions, and then once the show is over, suddenly you're slipped back a little bit more into the past, and people tend to really eat that up. They enjoy that. They're quite happy to leave the car and walk for a while.
Or take a Clydesdale.
Or take a Clydesdale. Take a ride on the Clydesdale, that's true. We do have a train. There is a
I noticed how
Dunrobin.
quiet it was when I was there. It was just so quiet. Of course, it was a little off season, but it was just, as I went from building to building and just saw the display of everything, it was just so peaceful. Lori, two things before we run out of time. It's moving really fast. One is they put up the website a moment ago, but would you repeat for those who might be in another room and they're hearing but not watching, what is your website if people want to know more about Fort Steele?
Thank you, Tony. www.fortsteele.bc.ca. And if I can spell that, it's FORTSTEELE.bc.ca.
Thank you so very much. Now, it's my understanding in talking to you earlier that the province had preserve this wonderful place and all, but now that it's going through a transition, and I believe is under private ownership now. Would you share what's happened?
There is actually, we're undergoing a change of management only. Ownership stays with the province of British Columbia, absolutely, and the province maintains its assets and maintains, I'll say, final consideration on any major changes that might want to occur at Fort Steele. The managers are actually my employers, the Friends of Fort Steele Society, actually all of our employers, as a matter of fact. The society has been in operation at Fort Steele since 1987, so it really is no stranger to the site at all. Okay. We've been operating all the food service and the ticketing and the theater lately, and various services as well. So the Friends of Fort Steele Society is a society with a board of directors of 15 and about 3,000 members in the community. And we are assuming management of the site as of April the 1st.
And by the time the show airs, that's already happened. But so the province owns it, but you are providing, as a private organization, you're providing these services that they contract with you to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in fact, there is an overall contract for the management of the site. It's not broken down by individual services anymore. We just have the overall management of it to provide all of the services that are akin to Fort Steele. So we'll be running the wagon rides and the train rides and the Living History Theater and the Wild Horse Theater and the retail and the food service and the ticketing.
So we're very short on time, but if someone was to come in there, say in July,
yes,
and they're coming to Fort Steele, this is some just now, but what are all the kind of things they would see?
Oh goodness, if they do come in July or August, they will have the opportunity to take a walking tour of the site, the Wild Horse Theater, the Living History Theater, steam train ride, horse-drawn wagon ride. There's a bakery with a wonderful wood stove, fresh baked goods. There is an international hotel restaurant where they can come in for a full buffet meal. What am I missing, guys?
Candy store.
The candy store, I'm sorry.
Panning.
Gold panning. These are all new things actually this year. And we're having an old-time photo studio added this year as well, so people can come in and get all dressed up in their own costumes of old and have a picture taken.
The Wassa Hotel has the history of the area, old-time photographs. For people that want to get to the nitty-gritty, it's there. Not many people go in the Wassa, that's what I've noticed, which is too bad, because if you really want to know what this place is about, that's where it's at.
And
Well,
most important, ice cream making.
Yeah.
Homemade.
What a note on which
Yes.
to end the program. Thank all four of you so much. It's been a delight to meet you, and thank you for coming to North Idaho College and sharing the wonderful story from Fort Steele and our friends in Canada. That's what this whole week's about, is celebrating our friendship. And we just appreciate you so much. And Lori, without you, it wouldn't have happened with this group. You were so helpful through the process. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us again next week, and we'll yet turn to another issue on celebrating Canadian-American friendship. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.